The endless script. Emma woke up to the sharp ring of her phone, cutting through the silence of the night. The clock read 3:17 a.m. She frowned, her heart pounding, as she reached for the device. The number on the screen was unknown. Hesitating for a moment, she answered. "Hello?" she whispered, her voice thick with sleep. Silence. Only the sound of heavy breathing filled her ears, a slow, deliberate inhale, followed by an exhale that sent chills down her spine. "Who is this?" Emma asked, her fingers tightening around the phone. No response, just the same unsettling breath. She quickly ended the call and tossed the phone onto her nightstand. It was probably a prank, she told herself. Nothing to worry about. But just as she closed her eyes, the phone rang again. The same number. Fear coiled in her stomach. This time, she didn't answer. Instead, she turned off the phone and buried herself under the covers. Yet, even in sleep, she couldn't escape it. The ringing continued in her dreams. The next morning, Emma tried to shake off the eerie feeling from the night before. It was probably just a random prank, she reasoned. As she walked to work, her phone buzzed with a new message. She unlocked it, expecting a notification from a friend or work email. Instead, there was a single line of text. 40.71 to 8 degrees north, 74.0060 degrees west. She frowned. Coordinates? A quick search revealed the location, somewhere in New York City. A prank, she thought again. But something about it gnawed at her curiosity. By the end of her shift, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had to check it out. The address led her to an old bookstore tucked away between two taller buildings. Its dusty windows and faded sign made it look abandoned. The door was locked. Emma pressed her face to the glass, peering inside. Then she froze. On a cluttered wooden counter, amidst piles of books, was a framed photograph. Her photograph. Emma's breath hitched as she stared at the photo. It was unmistakably her. Same wavy brown hair, same black coat she was wearing that very moment. But she had never been to this bookstore before. A chill ran down her spine. She stepped back, scanning the area. The street was quiet, the air heavy, with an eerie stillness. Just as she turned to leave, something on the ground caught her eye. A small folded piece of paper sticking out from under the bookstore's door. She bent down and picked it up. "We are here for you." Her stomach twisted. Who was we? And how did they know she would come? Heart pounding, she tested the door handle, locked, but something inside her urged her not to walk away. Glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she gave the door a firm push. It creaked open. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old paper. The dim lighting barely illuminated the tall bookshelves lining the room. Strange, unfamiliar titles filled the shelves, their spines cracked and faded with age. Then she saw it, a book resting on a small wooden table, as if someone had left it there just for her. Her name was on the cover. Emma, the final call. With trembling hands, she picked it up and flipped to the first page. What she saw made her blood run cold. The book was telling the story of her life. Emma's fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages. Every chapter detailed moments from her life, her childhood memories, her teenage years, even events she had never told anyone about. But it was the last few pages that made her chest tighten with fear. "There is no future for you." Her breath caught in her throat. She slammed the book shut, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. This wasn't possible. How could a book contain her entire life, And who had written it? Panic surged through her. She dropped the book onto the table and rushed for the door. She didn't stop running until she was back at her apartment, locking the door behind her. Gasping for breath, she leaned against the wall, trying to calm herself. But then, her blood turned to ice. Sitting on her coffee table, right in front of her, was the book. Her bag had been empty when she left the bookstore. But now, it was here. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as she stared at the book on her coffee table. She hadn't brought it home. She was sure of that. Yet, there it was. Her first instinct was to get rid of it. She grabbed the book and rushed to the kitchen, turning on the stove. The flames danced, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Without hesitation, she held the book over the fire. But just as the edges began to darken, ring, her phone vibrated violently on the counter. The same unknown number. Emma froze, gripping the book tightly. She hesitated for only a second before answering. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, a voice, distorted and cold, whispered, "Your time is running out." Emma's breath hitched. She threw the phone onto the floor, her fingers trembling. The call disconnected. She looked back at the book. The fire had gone out. The pages were untouched. Tears welled in her eyes. There was no escaping this. And deep inside, she knew. The calls wouldn't stop. That night, Emma barely managed to sleep. When she finally drifted off, her dreams pulled her back to the bookstore. She stood in the dimly lit shop, surrounded by towering bookshelves. The air was thick with dust, and the silence was deafening. But she wasn't alone. A shadowy figure lurked in the corner, its presence heavy and suffocating. "You have no choice," it whispered, its voice hollow and distant. Emma tried to move, but her body felt frozen. The figure stepped closer, its shape shifting like smoke. When it spoke again, its voice echoed inside her skull. The story must be completed. She jolted awake, drenched in sweat. The room was dark, but something felt off. Her eyes darted to her nightstand. The book was open. New words had appeared on the page, words she hadn't written. It described her nightmare, word for word. Emma's hands shook as she turned the page. The next chapter was already written. It described what would happen to her next. Emma soon discovered that the events written in the book were beginning to materialize in her life. Small misfortunes quickly escalated into major upheavals. She was unexpectedly fired from her job, and her longtime boyfriend, Michael, suddenly abandoned her. Unable to bear the weight of these inexplicable occurrences, even her relationships with her family, especially her sister Olivia, began to crumble under the strain of relentless misfortune. As each day passed, Emma felt more and more like a puppet in someone else's game. The realization struck her hard. The book was not merely a record of her past, but a script dictating her future. With mounting dread, she turned to the final page. There, in stark, ominous letters, the chilling words were inscribed. "When the final call comes, everything will end." The prophecy echoed in her mind, a constant reminder that her fate was no longer under her control. Desperation clawed at Emma's mind. She had tried everything, burning the book, shredding it, even throwing it into the river. Yet, no matter what she did, it always reappeared. That night, her phone rang again, the same unknown number. Hands trembling, she picked it up. This time, she didn't ask who it was. She didn't plead for it to stop. She just listened. A slow, deep breath came from the other end. Then a voice, distorted, inhuman, whispered, "The final call has come." Emma's breath hitched. A cold chill spread through her body, like something was standing right behind her. The lights flickered. The air in the room grew heavy. Then, her phone screen glitched, the numbers on it warping and shifting until only two words remained. "Turn around." Emma's entire body went rigid. She didn't want to, but something forced her to. And when she finally turned, she wasn't alone anymore. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she turned. A figure stood in the dimly lit room, its presence suffocating. It wasn't human. Its form flickered like a shadow, shifting and stretching unnaturally. She wanted to scream, to run, but her body refused to move. The figure took a step closer. "You were never meant to be here." The voice was deep, hollow, echoing from everywhere and nowhere. Emma's mind spun. "What do you mean?" she stammered. The figure extended a hand, and the book on the table flew open, its pages flipping rapidly before stopping on a single passage. It described her death. Not in the future, in the past. Emma's heart pounded violently. "No, that's not possible," she whispered. The figure moved even closer, towering over her. "You died a long time ago, Emma. You've been living in a story that isn't yours." Memories flooded her mind. Flashes of a car crash, of cold hands pulling her from the wreckage, of waking up in a life that didn't feel real. Tears streamed down her face as the truth settled in. She was never alive. She was just a story waiting to end. Emma's knees buckled as the weight of the truth crushed her. The memories, the life she thought she had, all of it was just an echo of something that no longer existed. The shadowy figure reached for her, and suddenly, the world around her warped. The walls of her apartment melted away, replaced by endless darkness. The only thing that remained was the book, still open, still writing itself. Her hands trembled as she watched the final words appear on the last page. She accepts her fate, and the story ends. A deep, suffocating silence fell over everything. Emma felt herself fading, as if she was nothing more than ink on a page being erased. Her last thought before everything turned to black was simple. Was she ever real at all? The next morning, in the dusty old bookstore, a new book appeared on the shelf. Its cover was untouched, its title written in elegant golden letters. The Final Call, A New Beginning. And just outside the store, a young man named Daniel walked past, only to stop as his phone buzzed with an unknown call.